Hey everybody, quick edit. Adding this into the beginning of the video. For the ensuing economic phase, once again, I failed to roll on this, use the initiative track and roll to adjust one faction towards neutral. I've caught it after the fact. The result was China. Moved everybody back one with China. The only change is that results in Asia gets one less dollar. Takes me a little while to catch it, but it's done, and play moves forward. Thanks. Welcome back to Stellar Horizons Campaign Game Playthrough, episode 34. We are in the 21-20 economic phase, and I'm going to do it just a little bit differently than I've done it in the past. So I'll do it a little more in the exact sequence of play, and you'll see what I mean. So the first thing, looking at the sequence of play, we've got collect political markers and roll for events. So I've done some of my math, but I haven't mathed everything out yet, and I haven't done the technology stuff at all. So this is just kind of what the players can see sitting before them as far as what they're going to get, on these tech points and things like that, and they can they have a sense of where their money's going to be. But like the Russians and the Asians haven't made a decision yet on if they're going to do biology research on Mars, and we will assign the Russians 7 of any type of technology that they get from the Mir base. I think it's still 7. Yeah, they've got 4 settlements at the Mir base at Earth, which gives them 7 of some type of research. So we'll make those decisions at the appropriate time within the sequence of play. Anyway, first thing is political markers. The Americans have 22, the Russians 12, and the Asians 17. Next up, and roll for events. So we'll roll for an event now. And I guess one reason why I'm doing this is in the past I've rolled for the events after I've already made all the decisions, and I think that I don't think there's been anything major, but it certainly could. 54. Let's see what 54 is. So 54. Immigration. The player with the fewest settlements everywhere can add 2 to any base they control. If multiple players are tied for fewest, they get to do 1. So let me figure that out, and I'll be right back. Who's got the fewest? All right. Asia has 23 settlements. Russia has 20 settlements, and America has 13 settlements. So they're going to get plus 2 settlements at any base they control. Ignore the event. Well, I think the ones that would be most valuable to them, certainly on a points standpoint, would be to add it out at Jupiter. And I think they like the idea of that, and I think they'll go for that. I'm considering Mars only from the standpoint that if they want to try to, if Mars gets terraformed and they want to try to contest that with the Asians, who have 14 right now, that would help the Americans to add some settlements here. But I think they're going to go for Jupiter and add 2 settlements out at Jupiter, because they were planning on building that up anyway, and now that puts them in a better position to trade with the civilian population at that base for whatever trade marker comes up. All right, so let's see. Next on the initiative roll for initiative, simultaneous. So I guess in reverse initiative order, people are supposed to assign political markers to getting the initiative. And if we'll remember, let's see here. Right now, America gets a plus 40% and Russia gets a plus 20. Russia is just going to, because they've got so few political markers. They've only got 12. They're worth 3 tech points because of their policy, and they've done the worst on tech points this turn compared to everybody else. They are not going to assign any markers to initiative, but Asia doesn't really want to be last, so they're going to go ahead and assign, let's say, 3. So they're going to assign 3 to initiative, and America is going to go ahead and do 1 more. So they'll be plus 20, plus 30, plus 50. And now we can roll. So America at plus 50. Well, that sucks for them. So even with, they rolled a 3. So their initiative is 53. And Russia, we said, is plus 20. And they got lucky with a 93. So they're up to 113. And Asia is doing plus 30. And that one's cocked. So we'll 5, 40, so 75. Okay. So the new initiatives for this turn, Russia and America switch places, and now Russia's 1, Asia's 2, and America is 3. Next on the sequence of play, diplomacy in reverse initiative order. So the Americans have to, what did we say? The Americans went down to, yeah, they spent 1, they spent 0, and they spent 3. So America's got 21 political markers. How many? First one is 1, second one is 2, third one would be 3. They're going to do something a little different. I guess, you know, in the recent decades, we've looked at, you know, maybe having the Americans do a military push. I think they're less interested in doing that right now. The things have kind of broken out, and I think they feel like they're behind the military. They're behind in points, or a little behind the Asians. And what else? They do have a slight military advantage, perhaps. Although they haven't built any of their CV6s, they're quite nice. If they get to CV8s this turn, then they'll definitely be in a good position. But I think what the Americans want to do is they're going to spend 1 to actually embargo. I was just kind of looking at the situation with non-player factions, rereading the rules there. Non-player faction bases. So they'd like to spend an attempt to push the South Americans towards embargo and eventually towards war. I think they are thinking that they may, if they're at war with the South Americans, then they could earn victory points. They could raid the South American base on Mercury to earn victory points and resources. And that may be a good play. I don't know. Anyway, they're going to do that instead of trying to spend a whole bunch to move up to be able to get a better trade relation. Right now they can only trade 2 resources with the South Americans. Do they want to change anything else? Well, the difference right now between free trade and collaboration, there's no benefit. So if they want to improve that. I think they would also, they're going to announce a -1 for the Asians. So those are their 2 attempts that they're going to announce. The Russians, on the other hand, still mainly want to save their political points for the, I'm sorry, the Russians don't go next, the Asians do. So the Asians, though, would like to see, and for them, there's no benefit to going past collaboration from a trade relation standpoint. So with the non-player factions going, an alliance, well, an alliance gives them a political marker. But I think they would rather try to bump up the trade. Of course, moving from free trade to collaboration gives them an extra $1 billion in income. Just doesn't change the resources. The South Americans, they can do 4, but the problem with the South Americans are their current base is at Mercury. That's not very helpful. But it could be. So yeah, I think they're just going to make the 1 attempt on the South Americans to move them up. And they'll let the Americans, do they want to counteract the Americans? And the answer is yes. For now they do. So they'll spend 2 more political markers. So that's 1, 2, but pushing up. So the reverse of the Americans. And the Russians are going to be happy with where they're at. Well, yeah, they're not going to worry about the South Americans, and these guys aren't going to get any better unless the Russians get them up to alliance, and they don't want to. I mean, do you spend 1? Maybe you do. I guess the Russians will spend 1 on the Chinese to improve it to collaboration. So let's see how that works out. So for the Americans, first the South American towards embargo, and then the second one will be the Asians. Okay, South Americans, that failed. That was a 9. And the next one with the Asians is a 5. So that moves down. And we do that, we move that one down, and we'd come over here, and we move the Asians down there. Then we resolve with the Asians. First we'll do the South Americans, and then the Americans. So the South Americans was positive, and we move that up. And the Americans also positive. So I've already moved that one up, and then this comes back to collaboration, and so that's been positive. And we said the Russians were going to spend 1 on the Chinese, and that worked out. So it doesn't really change anything right now, but it gives them the chance next turn potentially to push it to an alliance. Okay, so the Americans, I'm just going to come over here. So the Americans spent 3, so they're at 18. They spent 1, and they spent 3. All right, next on our sequence of play. That was diplomacy, earth, and base production. Okay, so I'm going to pause here in a second, but so we've mostly got the earth production figured out. First of all, we're in the 2120, so we're on the bottom row now, and that increased, points by 1, 2, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1. Plus a couple billion, 3 billion more for the Americans and 2 for those guys. So a little more money, a little more tech. Now is when the Russians, so they're getting 7 of something of one type from the Mir base, and they need to decide if they want to produce biology tech at Mars. Same thing with the Asians, but the Russians are going first. And I think the Russians still just have a small research station. So a small research station on Mars would get them 7 biology points. And because they're so far behind, I think they're definitely going to do that. Puts them up to, let's see, another 7 there. That'd be 35, 41. Is that right? Yeah. And with the physics, the Russians would really like to get these 2 biology techs. So I think they're going to put their +7 on both of those, or the 7 from Mir and 7 from Mars into biology, and get 14 more there. Anyway, I'll finish adding these numbers up and figure out what all the base production is, and see you guys in just a minute. Okay, here's what the production looks like. The Russians get to go first. They built 7 science at the Mir base, right here, that biology, and 9 points at Vostok. So it was 7 printed, but they also, because of their 7 colonists, they get +2 tech, and that's 9 points, bringing them up to 50 biology points. So that's not bad. Teslina base, this is the base out here at Europa, gets 9 supplies. The base at Ceres, 7. And this is the asteroid belt base, 11 ore. After that, the Asians, they're also going after biology research, so they get 1 less because the Russians also did it, but then they have a large research station and 14 settlements, and that brought the Asians up to 13 biology points at the Mars base, and they have 66 total. Sorry, we're doing Asians. Tara base, this is the asteroid belt. They had 10. Asha base, this is the Phobos and Deimos base, 6. 7. Remember, they're -1 because they're second, but they also are +1 because of their resource production ability. So this was at Ceres, and these are resources, 9 of them at Europa. And then the Americans. So the Spirit base, this is the Ceres base. They have a large refinery, which gives them +5, plus their settlements. This is the asteroid belt, gives them 13 ore. They've got a large mining station at Jupiter. They're getting 13 fuel. And Redstone base are the only ones who are producing supplies, so that gives them 8 supplies at Mars. And they got rid of the Independence base at the moon. We saw that at the end of the last turn. So we have finished out, so we can see, and over here on the side we've got the leftovers. Also, the Russians had 7 points left over in biology last time. Asians 1 of everything, Americans 3 biology. Anyway, here's the final numbers. You can see the tech points, and I also finished out the money. So this last number plus 9, because these guys get 2 for most of their relations and 1's for those. So Americans at $46, Russia 42, and Asia at 51. So that is the base production. Next up, resource transportation. So now everybody can transfer up to 10 resources between bases. So maybe I need to pause and think about this a little more, but it's a fair number of resources. So here, the Asians already have a cargo vessel sitting here, so they don't need to ready to pick that up. They could stand to move. They've also got a guy who can come get most of this, but not all of it. So maybe they want to move one of those. They'd like to send some ore to Mars to build more stuff there, more settlements, and this is Jupiter, so they are trying to build this out. And they've got a decent number of supplies. What they really need is ore here. Especially if they're going to, right now they've still only got the small spaceport, so they want to build that up, and settlements. That's going to take some of everything. All right, we're going to make this relatively straightforward. We're going to move one of these. So we'll move one supply out to here, so that's 1. And then I think they're going to move 9 ore. So we'll leave the 1 and we'll move 9 ore out to Jupiter. And I'll fix all that up. Of course, I'm just going down the line here. Let's see here. Russia. This is the Jupiter base. What they're really short on is fuel. Of course, they can get fuel relatively easy by mining it at Jupiter. They could spend money now to buy fuel and send it out, but this is the Jupiter base, sitting on tons of supplies. They've got ore over here that needs to come this way. They've also got a lot of supplies. If they just move that over here, they could build settlements here. But those Jupiter settlements are nice. So we're going to make it simple. We're just going to move 10 ore out to Jupiter and call it good. There might be a slightly more efficient thing. All right, the Americans. So here the Americans have, of course, the Americans have the big cargo hauling capacity. So they've already got a CV-4 sitting here at the asteroid belt that could carry 14 resources away from here. Americans are already sitting on quite a bit of supplies, fuel, ore. They need more ore out here for sure, but they'll also want, they've got 10 supplies right now. I think the Americans are also just going to move 10 supplies out this way and call it good. All right. It may not be the most efficient, so that was resource transportation, assign non-player faction bases, pirates, asteroids, and trade markers. Well, we're rolling twice for pirates and asteroids because of the year, and now 2120 introduces a change with pirates. Up to now we've been using the weak side of the pirates, CV2s, with 1 combat factor. Now we use stronger pirates that are size CV4s, and they have 3 combat factors. So let's start off with the non-player faction base location. It's a 93. I'm sure that's not going to be in play yet. 93 is Pluto, and Pluto 2140, or that system. So again, no new base. Now we're going to roll pirates twice. First pirate, 74. 74 is the Uranus system, and that's 2120. So there is going to be a pirate out here. Second pirate, 8. Well, 8 is right here near Earth asteroid, so that pirate is at Earth. All right, asteroids. First asteroid, a 4. So that's going to be at Mercury. And the second asteroid, 38. 38 is Vesta, so that'll be an asteroid right here. And what else did we say? Trade markers. Okay. Going to put them in a cup. So we're going to start off with the South American. It's over here at Mercury. You can sell them fuel. I don't think anybody's going to do that, but we never know. Russian Mir base in Earth orbit. Can buy supplies there. Chinese Zing base. Sell supplies. Japanese. Buy fuel. Left to right, the 3 bases on Mars. Buy supplies. Stick them up above, because we'll always end up doing that anyway. Buy fuel. And buy ore. The Phobos Deimos base doesn't get one. The Ceres bases don't have any settlements, but all 3 of these do. Buy ore. Sell fuel. and sell fuel. And at Jupiter, the American base, buy fuel, and we'll do the Asian and then the Russian base at Europa. Sell ore, and sell ore. Okay, that is all of the trade markers. Let's just think about that. Selling ore, of course, ore is what's the biggest shortage out there, so that's not a huge incentive. The Americans can buy more fuel, which may help. They may like that. I mean, they just produced 13, but they don't have a good place to go mine any additional. So if they need some more, they can get it. Of course, and they might like to, because they can make some cash by selling it. Same thing with the Russians. The Asians can buy ore at the asteroid belt, where they are sitting on 11 right now at the asteroid belt, and they just moved some here, so they may think about that. At Mars, a bunch of buy resources. People probably will take advantage of that just to help stock up Mars for additional settlement building. Of course, selling to the Chinese, that's nice. That's a good way for somebody to make a little bit of money. The Asians have the advantage there. Russians can do it to 4. Americans, can sell 4 resources. The Asians can do 6, and then there's buying, and of course the Russians can buy supplies right there and then move it over. So that's pretty good for them. Selling fuel, like I said, fuel's kind of hard to come by, although you get some pretty easily at Venus, but nobody has I guess the Asians might be the only ones who'd be interested in trying to nail that down, because they have the 6 capacity, and these guys are limited to 2 resources for selling, so probably not worthwhile for the Russians or the North Americans to head out to Mercury and sell that. Okay, next up in the sequence of play, develop technologies in reverse initiative order. Again, I'll just pause now, and I'll do what I normally do. Of course, at this, I didn't game it all out as I normally do. So these are the 18, 11, and 11 are the political markers left to the 3 factions and their tech points. So see you in a minute, and we'll see what people bought. Okay, let's review what people built. Of course, I'm not going to go through. Here's the sequence. It started off with the Americans, then the Asians and the Russians, and it goes through everything that they built in order and where they ended up. But we'll just review kind of the results. So both the Americans and the Asians picked up the space refining. The Russians caught up here in biology. The Americans and the Asians picked up the CV range 4, and so did the Russians, but the Russians also had to pick up CV exploration +3 prior to that. So everybody's pretty comparable. Also, the Americans finally picked up existing life. They used that mainly just to kind of delay a purchase and see if they could get somebody else to make a choice, and nobody changed anything with the recall rate. In physics, the Asians and the Americans picked up the ability to buy physics points. Everybody picked up the heliocentric transfer speed 0.5, so everybody's just a little bit faster now. The Americans were able to, and I think they had to pay a little bit of money. Yeah, so they had to supplement it with a little bit of cash, and they got the advanced trade routes, so the Americans will be able to do trade 15 resources after production in the next economic phase. I guess the big thing here, the Americans were able to get to battleships, so they can build their CV-8s. Nobody else can do that. The Russians had to pick up a couple things here. Everybody can buy engineering points, and even though the Asians were quite a bit behind, they ended up spending, well, a lot of their political markers plus some cash. They used the ended up buying 8 physics points and 4 engineering points, because the Asians really wanted to get that space heavy transport to double the CV cargo capacity and the launch vehicle capacity. That seems to be quite a powerful tech. The Americans are also, so they got the battleships. They also picked up artificial intelligence, which is a malfunction rate for the REs at 15%, and now up to +3. And so that's where everybody is at on the techs. Next, we do the settlement growth. So we can just do this. This is automatic for everybody. So let's see here. 8 at Tara Base, that's asteroid belt for the Asians. 7, so that's a growth. Puts them to 9. Let's see here at Mars, they're at 14, so they automatically grow 1, and we roll the fractional piece. They got a 10, so they just grow the 1. It's going to go from 14 to 15. And at Jupiter, they have 1 settlement. They get the 1. No. So that is all of the Asians. Russians, 4 at Mir. They got it. So Mir goes to 5. Which puts them in a new category, and next turn they'll get +2, so they'll be up to 8 of any kind. Let's see here. This base has 8. This is Zatsava, that's the asteroid belt. I guess I'm going to zoom out. There's an 8. They got a 9, so they didn't get the growth there. This Vostok base has 7. That's a 6, so that will grow from 7 to 8. Vostok is the Mars base, and they have 1 at Jupiter, or Europa, technically. 6, no. Okay, Americans, they have 6. This is the asteroid belt. 7, so that's no. At Mars, they have 6. They did grow there. And at Jupiter they have 3. No. And then the last thing in the economic phase is the policy step in reverse initiative order. So the Americans have to make a decision on their policy first. Well, they still, everybody can only have one unified policy, and everybody's already got one. So if you pick a new unified policy, you've got to drop back down one. Just thinking here, also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think you may be limited to 10 policies. So after this, people may have to lose a step to gain a step somewhere else. I guess if the Americans were going to pick something, it's either one extra political marker or another $2 billion. I think they'll take the political marker. Next up is the Asians. What do the Asians want to do? Again, they're 2, 3, that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, yeah. So really the Asians, they're already, well, I think they'll take the 20%. So they'll do the embargo. And then the Russians, I think, will follow the Americans here on the military policy. So everybody's kind of pushing up on the military policy now. And that is and I apologize, I think my camera work wasn't so good there. Anyway, that is the economic phase. We'll stop here. I'll reset all of this. I need to some people spent some money. Like I said, the Asians and the Americans spent a little bit of money. The Asians spent $12. The Americans spent $4. It's these circled numbers. That's tech points that they used. And the squares is where they used political markers. So I'll make sure to subtract that cash. Of course, the Asians are doing great on cash. They could have bought more, and they're the richest player, or they have the most, income. When we come back, it'll be the build phase, and we'll see what everybody builds. So, see you in a minute. And I'll tell you, I'm playing at night, so it's actually not going to be a minute. I'm going to stop for the evening, and I'll just pick the video up tomorrow. Okay, and after a significant delay, I am back recording. Just going to give kind of big overview here, or a different view anyway. Let's see here. So we're doing the build phase. A couple of notes. I did not, when we added the 2 pirates, I didn't add the money for the pirates into the pirate cache. So right now there is $14 billion in the pirate cache. Every time we add a pirate, we add 5 billion. So that has been done. The other thing I didn't discuss, there was a new mission set. So Chiriclo CV crude vehicle 2120. So that gets added, and that is this moon system here, or just single moon. And that is now a mission. And of course, everybody is sitting here at Saturn with a crude vehicle ready to rush out there and try to accomplish that. So we'll see that. Plus, there's a pirate here. Pirates, at least in this game, they pop up and they're actually worth a victory point, political point, and some money. So they seem to be a good thing. And remember, there's a pirate here at Earth, the asteroid at Mercury, and an asteroid at the flyby. So let's see what the builds are. Oh, one other thing I forgot. The Americans had a rover sitting here at the end of the decade. You can see there was no point in them keeping that rover, and I just failed to notice that. So the Americans, I retroactively let them decommission it, and that gave them $1 billion extra dollars for being under their robotic explorer limit. I think that was the only change that I can think of. Okay, so the Americans have to build first. Well, they say there's a pirate at Earth and we can build a CV-8. Let's go for it. So they're going to spend $20 billion. They're also spending these resources out at Jupiter to ready that crewed vehicle 4. And doing something a little different. We don't normally do this. I think we might have done it before. They're expending this at Jupiter. So they're buying the orbiter and the launch vehicle 2 with the resources from Jupiter. And try that out. They don't have they had a lot, or they had some more there, 10. They've spent 3 of it. Yeah. So they're going to, of course, with the launch vehicle 2, they can get things out. They get a 1-year bonus, but everybody's speed is just a little bit faster. So they're going to try launching from Jupiter. Asians are next up in the builds. Well, they saw what the Americans did. Since they'll have the initiative, they said, okay, you are building a crewed vehicle to take out the pirates. We'll do the same. And so the Asians are just going with their CV-5. They could go with the CV-6. Let's take a look. Exploration's the same. It has 1 more drone, but this one's got 2 more combat factors. This one, of course, can take 1 more hit. I think I value 2 combat factors over 1 drone. That may be an incorrect assessment, but that's where I'm at. Asians are also spending a lot of money on LV-4s and robotic explorers at Earth. They're spending like $35 billion. But even with all that, they're left at $44 billion, which is pretty much what the other guys started the turn with. So the Asians are doing great with money. The Russians, seeing the CV race at Earth, they say, well, we're going to have the first crack, so we're going to build a CV. And they're going to go with the 7, because that's nice. And they're also building a flyby and a rover. Probe's going to go with the flyby. Of course, they're the only ones with launch vehicles on Earth, so they got lucky that they didn't have to spend $10 billion for that. And that was kind of what was driving this decision with the Americans. They have no launch vehicles. They've got a plan to make some money. They can, this decade, they can buy fuel at Mars, haul it over here and sell it. So that should be a pretty good profit for them. The Asians are thinking of doing something similar, buying supplies here at Mars and taking it to the moon and selling it to the Chinese. The Russians could also sort of buy some, they can buy some fuel from the Japanese and take it over there and sell that. They buy ore here, they could bring it out here and sell it. Of course, these cells right now are kind of limited in their appetite. Both of those guys could only sell 2 ore. Actually, that's incorrect. Yeah, it's 2. So we'll see how that develops. Everybody's kind of looking for a way to make money. The asteroids, well, we'll see all that as we play out. So anyway, that is the builds. Oh, another big aha I had this decade, as I was kind of planning everybody's getting sort of a general plan for everyone. There is no more biology research in the game, or as far as exploration. So the last ones were out here at Saturn. I'm sorry, these two. So every other place that's out here is physics or engineering. Yeah. So you can get biology if you do exploration at Alpha Centauri, and you randomly roll an 8 to, looks like 8, 9, or 10. But there's still a lot of biology research to happen, and nobody has the tech, and there's intervening tech here to be able to spend money on biology points. So the options are using your political markers, and of course everybody's got a tiny little bit of income, but that's negligible. And then the other thing that's going to happen is what the Russians and Asians have been doing at Mars, research stations. So there are some good places where people can research biology, but they're going to have to build a base. And of course everybody's got a base here at Ceres, and it just happens to have, it's got 6 biology that are research station. And I think if you're going to do that, everybody's going to upgrade to a large research station so you can get the +3. The Russians really should have done that a couple of decades ago. And then of course out here at Jupiter, both at Europa and Callisto, 6, and then there's a +1 for the signs of life. So both of those locations have 7 biology, and of course the Russians and the Asians already have a base there, so they're ahead of the game on that. If they want to build a smaller research station and supplement their biology tech income. So that is something that everybody is going to need to focus on, because nobody's going to be drawing a biology, well, I say nobody's going to be drawing a biology chip. That's incorrect. When the crewed vehicles get recalled, that will happen. So there'll be some passive, but the recall rates are low, so it's not going to happen a lot. Of course, physics and engineering, everybody can buy engineering points. The Russians are the only ones who can't buy physics points, but that one's already pretty cheap now, and there's still, of course, physics and engineering points left on the board. So we're entering a new phase of the game. It's very interesting, just the way that the game's kind of economy shifts. At the beginning, you're stuck on Earth, everything's expensive, everything fails. Then you get to these bases, and you're trying to generate resources, and now at this point, everybody's kind of covered up with resources a little bit, and it's a logistical problem to be efficient with them. And now all of a sudden we've hit a tech crunch with biology. Well, we'll see what happens. So let's see here. Going into the movement phase now. Transfer box movements. Russians have a crewed vehicle 3, and of course I think the Russians now, with these new crewed vehicle purchases, the Russians and Americans are 2 over their support limit. The Asians are 1 over. So maybe everybody keeps all their crewed vehicles, or especially the Russians and and maybe the Americans let a less useful crewed vehicle get decommissioned, and you get half the resources back, so that's not a bad deal. So there's that one, and I think that's all of the transfer box movement that we've got. So first up in movement are the Americans, and I guess we can put all of these, everybody's got the space elevator, so all these crewed vehicles are up here in Earth orbit. Americans are going to move to the flyby and try to hunt for the pirate. Of course, they'll have the last chance, so the Russians will have the first chance at killing the pirate. So that's what the Americans there are doing. American Crude Vehicle 3 here. Well, it's actually going to go to the flyby box. There's an asteroid here, and I think the Americans are the ones who can best capture this asteroid at Mercury. So distance from Mars to Mercury is 3, and so that's going to be a 2-year journey. And their plan to buy and sell fuel can wait, because that asteroid might not. All right, American Crude Vehicle over here. Well, let's see here. American Spirit Base is sitting on 5 supplies. But the Americans are also going, well, do we want to take all those supplies away? Or do we just want to throw 3 ore over there and build a research station at a base they already have? And I think the answer might be yes. And they've got supplies everywhere else. So these 5 supplies at the Spirit Base are not a pressing concern. The ore that they need, they could go mine it, or they can just go take it from the Redstone Base. Of course, the Redstone Base could just try its luck with launching ore, and that would probably work. And we said it only needs 3. And remember, their LV-3s actually, of course, can send 3, but with the heavy space transport tech, it's double capacity. So this guy can actually launch 6 resources out to another base. I think actually we'll do that this turn. Just take care of that. So what does that American CV4 want to do? Well, it's got a big cargo capacity of 14, sorry. And of course, mining ore at Vesta would be nice. The Americans don't have a, buying and selling here at the moon. Those, they can sell or buy 4 resources. So it's like, if you're close by, you might do it, but you spend this CV4. What are the Americans? Let's think about what that CV4 wants to do. And they've got another one here at Jupiter. We've got to think about what their plan is there. The American CV5, the Enterprise, definitely wants to go back to Jupiter. So it's going to go to the 1 box. And the Endeavour definitely wants to go to Uranus. So that just leaves the launches. And what is the plan for these CV4s? Are there, it's either moving resources around or going and mining for more. Well, the Americans are also thinking about building a base at Uranus. Let me just check here. Yeah, the Americans, I think, were just 1 over their base limit. Yes. So would it be worth, of course, right now it's early, building a base out here? It's hard to know if it'd be easy to make an incorrect choice. But a base at Uranus then would support crude vehicle exploration out to the end of the, well, not to the end, it wouldn't get you to the scattered disk, but it would open up Neptune and the Kuiper belt to crude vehicles. So that's something for them to think about, but that's not an immediate goal, I don't think. And of course, I guess everyone can do that. Everybody can build the base or get to crude vehicles here. Building a base, though, is still a little bit tricky for the Russians. Everybody's only got base construction cost -2. So the Russians can't get a cargo capacity to build a base. They would need 7 supplies to build a base here. They only need 6 here, and the Russians can do that. The Asians, you know, now that they have the heavy space transport, their crude vehicle 4s carry 12, so they can build a base out here. The Americans can build a base out here, no problems. For the North Americans and the Asians to build bases at Uranus. Right now, the only place the Russians could do it is Uranus proper. Excuse me. And of course, the other reason to build a base out here is settlements out here are like worth 2 points. I think they're worth 1.5 or 1. Let's see what those point values. Sorry, I'm all over the place. Jupiter and Saturn 1.75 beyond 2. Okay. So it's an extra 1/4 point per settlement. Maybe that makes sense. Or maybe at this point the Americans just double down and make a massive Jupiter base. They've already got 3 settlements there. They can bring in resources from Saturn has got a couple of rich mining locations now. And they've got the resource generation from the inner system. So a base out here, you know, again, why would you build a base out here? Well, the range, you know, everybody's can get range 5 easy enough. That's a physics tech. And range 5 from Jupiter still doesn't get you to Neptune. So you really need a base, because there's 2 biology techs that both cost 40 points, and biology points are going to be hard to come by now. So that may slow down the progression in the biology tree. I think that's going to be the last one to get conquered. Okay, so back to, that's a whole lot of talking to decide what are we going to do with these American CV4s. Well, the Americans are definitely, since they are burning up ore here at Jupiter to build robotic explorers, and I think they'd like to keep on trying that. I think the thing to do is to mine more ore. So, and in the process, if they get a recall, well, that's okay, that's a biology chip. So that guy's going to come over here to Vesta. And I think we had a good, yeah, this one's 6 plus 2 is 8. So this crude vehicle is going to come over here, and let's see here, just talking about other things, everybody gets to subtract 1 from their space mining rolls now. And the other thing is, let's see here, yeah, Russians, recall they're up to 18% on the robotic malfunction rate, and they get a +2, but the Americans have maxed this out at 15% for the failures and +3 for the robotic explorers. Okay. Well, that's a plan for the Americans anyway. I think they will go ahead and let's launch the orbiter, and they are going to send that orbiter to Neptune. Neptune is a distance of 6 from Jupiter. So it's a 3-year journey, and they'll get a 1-year discount on that trip time. So it'll be a 2-year trip. Let's see what the launch recovery roll is like. 81. So that rocket is recovered and is sitting at Jupiter, and the orbiter is on its way to Neptune. We said that's a 2-year journey. They've got, you know, the crewed vehicles are going to come out here. They figure they'll just send the orbiter out there where it won't be molested, and these bonuses will offset the distance, so that's pretty nice. And then they're going to go ahead and launch 3 ore from Mars. Is that right? No, they're not going to do that, because they've got a plan. They want to build up the settlements on these bases. They're at 7 here on Mars. They'd like to get to 8 to bump up these trade numbers just a little bit so that they can maximize the money off the buying and selling of fuel at their with those trade markers. So they're not going to launch the ore. They'll figure that out later. So I think that's all of the Americans' movement stuff. Next up, the Asians. Well, they've got an orbiter here, crewed vehicle, coming out to fight pirates. This crewed vehicle at Phobos and Deimos, which is the Asha base, and it's just going to load up the 6 ore. This place is probably really should be considered for demolition. Yeah, the Asians really could stand to have, I think they were maybe 1 over their base limit. That base is, I mean, 6 ore is not nothing, but they could do, they could build a base out here and get 8 and put some settlements on it or whatever and get some more points. So there's other options. Anyway, crewed vehicle 6, and it's just going to come over here to Mars and drop that at the Mars base, which is ready to build some more settlements. And I think the Martian strategy now is going to be to really try to pump up the settlements here at Mars, and then try for terraforming. They've already got like a 10 settlement lead on almost. They're 7, I guess, on the Russians. But anyway, if they can aggressively pump up their settlements, then they can safely terraform Mars and feel like they'll be able to get the bonus. Okay, so that's what that crewed vehicle's doing. This crewed vehicle 4 is primed, and yeah, so there was an asteroid here. The Americans knew that the Asians were going to get to go first to get the asteroid, so the initiative was not in the Americans' favor, and they decided not to worry about that asteroid. Let's see here, we've got 2 Asian CV4s out here, or no, a 4 and a 3. So, of course, both those guys can remotely mine. And what is it that the Asians need? Well, they've got some of everything already out here. The Asians probably could have been able to do like the Americans built a launch vehicle and built robotic explorers out here, but I think the Asians are going to focus on trying to build settlements. They also want to build a large spaceport because they cannot support CV6s out here, and they can only build a maximum of a CV2 out of Jupiter. So they're about to blow through. They've got 9 ore, but they're going to use up half of it here in a second. So I think they're going to send their CVs Well, this one's such a good explorer. Do they want to go ahead and come out this direction? Of course, this CV5 is coming out here with the American going. So the question is, do they go to Saturn to mine? There's no exploration available. And, or they can just come out here to do more exploration. I think initially they're going to go for the exploration. So distance is 4, so that's a 2-year journey. And they're just counting on somebody else taking care of the pirate. I think that is all of the Asians except for these launches. So first one, the orbiter. They're going to send the orbiter to Neptune. So that's a 12, so they've lost the launch vehicle. And that is a so 5.5 from Earth, rounded up to 6. So a 6-year journey minus 3 for an LV4. Next is the rover, and they're going to send that out here to one of these engineering locations. 39 rocket is recovered. And that's 4.5 to 5. Minus 3 is a 2-year journey. That's all the Asians. Russians. Okay, well, Russian crewed vehicle going after the pirate. I don't have anything there. They've got a couple of CV4s. We'll think about that. CV6 is easy, just like everybody else. This Russian CV heading back to Jupiter. So 2 CV4s. What do the Russians need at Jupiter? Well, they don't have a whole lot of fuel. They're good on supplies and ore. So they're going to send one of these over here to Jupiter to mine for fuel. Do the Russians have... What? Okay, the Russians, they used to have that CV3 working the inner system. Now they don't have anything working in the inner system. So they don't have any transport capacity. You know, they've got all these supplies sitting at Ceres. Mars doesn't have anything, and the asteroid belt has a bunch of stuff. So they really kind of need to send this, I think, back to Ceres, or back to the asteroid belt, and help them with some of these logistics. So I think we'll try that. First launch for them is going to be a flyby, and they will target Uranus. Yeah. Targeting Uranus. Okay, launch vehicle 4. 85. And what do we say that is? It's 5 years minus 3, so it's a 2-year trip. And the rover also going to Uranus. 74. And we'll put the flyby on top because it can actually start exploring from there. That looks like all of our movement. All right. And I've forgotten this before, but after movement phase is the combat phase. So first up, the Russians. The Russians are going to search for the pirate. I think all of our die rolls here, the pirate's going to be the black die and the player faction will be the red die. So first we have to do a search roll. And just make sure I'm doing this correctly, but it's a die roll of 4 normally. And if you have the fighter tech, subtract 1 from your search roll if your fleet contains a drone squadron. So, well, the Russians don't have a drone, so this is just going to be both sides roll a 4, and both people found. So the pirates rolled a 4, but the Russians did even better with a 1. So there's a search. Now we have to resolve the tactic points. You get tactics points equal to the other side's die roll. So the pirate is going to get 1 tactic point, and then we're going to end up subtracting that from the Russians. The Russians get 4, and then they have the tech that gives them +1, which makes them a 5, and then subtract 1, so it's back to 4. So the Russians have 4 tactics points. They would probably like to do direct fire combat, but I don't know if they want to spend. So we're looking at what can you spend your tactics points, or do they, and they need to get 4 hits to destroy the pirate. It only costs 1 to choose direct fire, and that's going to improve the table. The Russians are going to be rolling, they have a 7 combat value, a d10, and they get to add +3 to their attack roll. So it's effectively like a 10 plus a die roll. 10 plus a die roll, and they're looking for a result of 4, which they can get on a, so if they get a 4 or better in direct fire combat, they'll kill the pirate. So they're going to spend 1 of their tactics points to make it direct fire combat, and they're going to spend 2 tactics points to increase the damage on the pirate. And they are going to not worry about the pirate cannot destroy them. So as long as they don't lose the CV6, they're willing to accept some damage. So that's what they're going to do. So it looks like the Russians, so we'll roll for the Russians first. So we said they're 7 plus 3, and the die roll is a 9. 19 is 6 damage, and they use 2 tactics point to make it 7. So that pirate's gone. The pirates' combat roll was an 8, plus their combat value of 3 makes it an 11, which is 3 damage on the Tchaikovsky. So we put 3 damage, and that, let's see here, let's resolve. Well, we'll just look at the post-combat stuff. So now here's interesting. Normally, okay, post-combat effects, let's see here, it's a 1 victory marker for CV2s and 3s, 2 victory points for CV4s and 5s. Well, that pirate was technically a CV4. So there's 2 victory points that are, oh, that's for each player controlled CV, so that's specific. So scratch that. So we just look at the pirate stuff, and Destroying a pirate earns you half the pirate cash, a political marker, and a victory marker. So that's same as it ever was. So political marker, a victory point for the Russians. Half that, 7 billion. And they have to roll 3 times on the recall, or up to 3 times. Once they get one, they're recalled. First, 24. Their recall is a 20. Second roll, 29 and 24. So no recall for the Russians. So that's going to be the end of the combat phase. And the Russians got half that ship just paid for. That is all of our combat. So next up, exploration. I don't think there's, of course, any exploration going on anywhere out here. Of course, well, CBs can't, so the only way to do this is with like an orbiter or a flyby. So the Russians have an orbiter here at Saturn, and there's 2 targets. The better one, because of the +3. So 4 plus 4 is 8, minus 1 for the distance is 7. And a set, they got the 7 and a 31, so that is a successful engineering marker. And they got the first depletion of the turn. So it's another victory, I'm sorry, another political marker. I'm just going to swap that out. Sorry for the glare, give me a second here. Hopefully that's a little better. So the 1's going to a 0. Got the political marker, we did that. 2 world cards need to be pulled. First is Impact Basin, second one is S-class asteroid. Well, the asteroid's not going to apply, and the question is, do they want to do the Impact Basin or keep it as mixed ice? I think they're actually, I don't know what the right thing to do is. They're going to go with the Impact Basin. Mixed ice is actually a little more interesting, but there's nothing particularly interesting about that moon or those moons either way. And so I think they're going to put the mixed ice back in the mix so it could be used somewhere else. Next up, there's probably, well, they've got a flyby. And they're going to go for it. So they are a 5, plus 5 is 10, minus 2. So they'll go for Oberon. So they are an 8, a success, and an 18, which is their malfunction rate. Yeah. So they're getting an engineering marker and then another engineering marker. And the Russians So they've lost the probe too. So, but first is a 1, so no depletion at Oberon. Next one's a 1 as well. So they've got that, and the Russian flyby and probe come off the board. And they'll just build it and launch it again next turn. Any other explorations for the Russians? I do not think so. Next up would be the Asians. They have an orbiter here. Gets +2, so it's a 3, +5 is 8. 69 and 2, so they get a physics marker. And that's a 1. Other Asian exploration? Probably not. Nope. And the Americans. Exploration for them. Just scanning, I'm almost certain the answer is no. Nope. Okay. Next up, resource mining. There is some of that. So starting with the Russians. Well, the Russians are going to do fuel here. So fuel at Jupiter. It's an 11, and they get to subtract 1 from the red die. About 3 turns ago, I mentioned that the Russians, they rolled, and I went back and looked. They had not rolled a 2. So an 8 and an 83. So they're going to get 2 fuel. That's all of the remote mining for the Russians. Next up, the Asians, and they've got this asteroid. So subtracting 1, I don't think you do that. I think you just roll the, yeah. So 59, of course a 1 is actually the worst roll here. So that asteroid is just worth 3 supply. But they also get a victory point for it. And then the other one is the Americans mining for ore at Vesta. The target is number is a 7. They got the 7 and a 24. So 2 ore. And that looks like all of the remote mining. Next up, trade and base construction. Let's see here. I think the answer is going to be a yes. The Asians are going to go ahead and buy supplies here at Mars. Or, strictly speaking, the Russians, I guess. So let's see here. The Russians are not going to worry about doing that just yet. They're not going to sell fuel in Zatsava. They're not going to do that. They can buy supply in Mir. They're not going to worry about that right now either. So the Russians, no. But the Asians, yes. They're going to buy that. And they, at Mars, they can buy 10. So they're going to spend $5 billion and get 10 supplies. And let's see here, the Americans are not doing any of their buying and selling. So I think that's it for the trades. Base construction, probably in reverse order. The Americans definitely want to build a settlement here because they would like to be at 8 settlements. So that's 2, 2, and 1. So Mars is going up to 8 settlements. And so now, at 8 settlements, they can buy 8 fuel. They also need to build some more settlements over at the Freedom Base. I think the Freedom Base is sitting at 6, and they'd like it to be at 8 as well. So they're going to spend 2, 1 fuel, 2 supplies. So they get 3 supply change. And that'll take them to 7. They've already got a large mining station. They've got a large spaceport. I'll do another digression here. I was just kind of looking, with the number of decades left in the game, if you're spending, 14 resources to do like a small and a large refinery up from a large mining station, that's a net of plus 4 resources. So let's say somebody does that this decade. From an economic standpoint, just pure payback, you're going to get this decade, 3 decades, and probably that one, but not guaranteed. Variable end. Even this one's not guaranteed, but I suspect we'll make it into the 2150s. So let's say 3 decades at plus 4 resources. That's 12 resources, extra resources that you produce. You spent 14 to do it. Well, that doesn't quite pay off, but it is worth each level as a victory point. So I think that's a good deal. But if you wait another decade, it might not be as good of a deal, because you'd be paying 14 for 10, or I'm sorry, for 8. Yeah. 14, get 8 back, and of course it matters what the resource is. People have been having a problem getting fuel, but I don't know if the Russians, they're already getting a lot of fuel, and when it comes to building settlements and things like that, the ore and the supply are more advantageous. The fuel really just goes into the this supply station spaceport chain. It's not used anywhere else. Ore is used on everything. So ore, if you're going to do refineries and things like that, doing it at a location like the asteroid belt may be the best plan. So that's just thinking ahead. What are the Americans doing out here? They've got a bunch of stuff. Of course, really what they're throwing their ore into right now is robotic explorers. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. So I think the Americans will hold off on building anything there right now. The Asians, well, they've got tons of stuff here. So they're going to spend 2, 2, and 1. And they're going to build another settlement at Mars. The asteroid belt. Sorry, this is not the asteroid belt. This is Jupiter. This is the asteroid belt. The asteroid belt has the large spaceport. Not building anything here right now, but they are going to go ahead and upgrade this to a large spaceport. So that costs 4 ore and 4 fuel. And now all of a sudden they're fuel poor again. So it was actually a mistake. Well, they can get fuel at Titan too. So it's probably worthwhile for them to do that. So that was that, and they're not building anything over here. So that's all of the builds, and that is the turn. Yeah, I think we're at, that was just 53 minutes here, just in this second half. So that's going to be it for today. When we come back, it will be the year 2121. Thanks for watching. If you guys have any ideas or thoughts about the direction of the game, I think in the last video I was kind of poo-pooing the combat. I think with the Americans and the CV-8s, maybe they try to bum rush everybody. The other thing, again, just looking at the rules for non-player faction bases, I think it's possible to milk them for quite a number of resources and victory points. And so that's something that I think the Americans could definitely do. I mean, everybody could do it. I think the Americans are uniquely positioned to do it because they can go to, well, the Russians can also go to war. So the Americans or the Russians might think about that. And actually, because you get, when you raid, if you declare war on them and you raid their base, you can do that every turn. You may generate some damage. I mean, you will generate some damage for yourself, so you'll have to probably cycle crewed vehicles in and out. Certainly it's resource intensive because you're also going to need a cargo vessel to carry away the loot. But it's going to generate a victory point, some resources. You may end up accidentally destroying the base, but you could create a base on Venus, milk Mercury. You get to choose what the resource is. So if you pull supplies, you can start bringing that over here, and somebody could might be able to build up Venus into something interesting. So anyway, that's an idea. So there's a couple of different approaches. Pushing out here, throwing some settlements out here, just these settlement rushes, terraforming, combat. We've got different directions that this could evolve to, so we'll just have to see. Anyway, goodbye again, for real now. Have a good one.